But how have you spoken to these? How have you spoken? No, of course you can't. Not if you're going to come on my radio and say things that aren't true.
But it is true.
Well, of course it isn't. Every single
Ariana Grande concert.
Well, I don't want to imagine that. I'm not. I'm talking about marches. Stop it.
I feel bad for the people that were killed,
but you're making stuff up again.
Very, very frustrated.
You're making stuff up again.
No, I'm not. That's exact same parallel.
You're having an imaginary conversation about a completely different atrocity.
What is up, everybody? Harry here. This is James O'Brien on LBC with a caller named Anna, and it's one of the more heated exchanges about the pro-Palestinian marches in London. O'Brien pushes back hard on a specific factual claim that the marches always erupt in violence and runs through the actual charge sheet from the police. From there, it moves into much harder territory, fear in the Jewish community, anger over October 7th, and what compassion actually looks like on both sides of this conflict. I want to be upfront that this is a genuinely contested, high-stakes topic where people hold sincere and differing views. And I'll try to be fair to both sides of it rather than just picking a winner. Get subscribed if you want breakdowns that take this seriously. Let's get into it.
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'll tell you what it is. With so much unrest and so much fear within the Jewish community, most of these pro-Palestinian protests erupt in violence. There's there's hate that's called out, and I think...
No, they don't, because I have to be clear on this. They don't erupt in violence. There've been I think there were 9 arrests and there have been 5 charges, including people arrested for attacking... Well, I'll run you through it all, actually. There's been a racially aggravated public order offence by a person of no fixed abode who allegedly shouted racist abuse. There's a public order offence after a can of beer was allegedly thrown at a protester in Whitehall. There's been an actual bodily harm charge after an officer was allegedly assaulted and suffered a head injury, which also happened at the Countryside Alliance March a few years ago. And then you've got another racially aggravated public order offence relating to an allegedly racist placard. And then you've got a 16-year-old boy who can't be identified because of his age, has been charged with a public order offence after directing verbal abuse at officers. So you understand I can't let you say they always erupt into violence when they categorically don't.
Well, there is a lot of hate. I mean, they're looking
let's
for...
not gloss over it. You have to accept that you cannot say they always erupt into violence when they categorically don't.
No, but there are things that that the police won't and can't pick up on.
If that's the basis of your position, then your position becomes untenable immediately.
There is hate. Would you not agree with that?
There's hate everywhere. There's hate on the West Bank at the moment. You've seen what the American Secretary of...
Can I say anything?
Yes, of course you can, as long as it's true.
When you think about the fear that Jewish people are feeling all over the country, something that exacerbates that and something that makes them feel even more scared. I mean, there are no Jewish people that would feel comfortable to go into a Palestinian protest, and even the word
there were Jewish people on it.
There
were Jewish people on the march, and you've seen the footage from Central Station in New York as well of Jewish people protesting.
They're far extremists, and in terms of their support, their anti-Israel narrative. But that it's not. But if the fact is that people would be scared to go to a protest like that, whereas in direct contrast to that, the Israeli...
But again, I'm sorry you feel I'm interrupting you, but if you say things that aren't true, I have to. There were Jewish people on the march on Saturday.
Okay. But the majority...
So they wouldn't be... You can't say they'd be scared to go, can you?
It is very scary. It is very scary.
No, I'm not disputing that you're scared. I'm just disputing your claim that it always erupts into violence and that Jewish people would be too scared to attend to demonstrate their sympathy for Palestinian people being killed. Because neither of those things are true.
No, what I'm not saying is that people can't march in solidarity, but the fact is it's a protest which ends up often being anti-Israel. There were 3 women who were wearing pictures
out of 100,000 people.
That's not the point. The point is that
it is. Of course, it's the point.
Fear.
Of course, it's the point, because you can call those people hateful, you can call those people insightful, but you can't call the march a hate march. Because of what 3 women did.
Between a march and a protest rather than a vigil or solidarity, there's a big difference.
Well, you can call it whatever you want.
With hate. No, but there is a difference. You can't dispute that.
I can dispute anything I want.
Standing peacefully in vigil and market and thinking about the people that hurt the victims, etc. And absolutely, I think no one wants to see. So
it's the fact that they're walking.
Civilians.
It's the fact that they're walking.
It has a much angrier tone.
Well, there is huge anger about all the Palestinians being killed, just as there was huge anger about all the Israelis killed on October the 7th. You must have been angry.
Anger.
You must have been angry.
I was devastated.
Okay.
It was heartbreaking.
Well, I was angry.
There's a very different. Well, there's a very different.
I was very, very angry. I don't know if you heard the show. I was absolutely livid.
Yeah, but what were you angry about?
The murder of 1,400 Israelis.
But was that anger directed at the horrific terrorists?
Of course it was.
Was that compassion and devastation for the victims?
It was both. Unthinkable, unjustifiable, intolerable were the words that I used to describe what Hamas had done. Heartbreaking, utterly, utterly devastating were the words that I used to describe the victims. So why can't people? Why can't people be angry? Why can't people be angry about Palestinians being killed as well?
I just want to shout out that the first day that you did your show was brilliant. You were really compassionate, really kind, really sensitive, absolutely.
And really angry.
Yes, but I think there's more anger. What does I mean? It's about compassion and being devastated. Anger
and being angry.
Do something.
And being angry. So if I'm allowed to be angry about the killing of Israelis, why can't I be angry about the killing of Gazans? Why can't people march in anger at the killing of Palestinians?
It's about compassion. That's the difference.
Okay. So how do people show their compassion?
Anger then says, who can I fight? Anger is, who can I punish?
Well, and that's why I had to pick you up at the beginning on the claims that it always erupted into violence when it simply doesn't. So no one's really looking for a fight.
Anger.
No one's looking for a fight.
I don't mean violence I mean violence as in anger, and that leads on to who can I blame?
You can't, unfortunately. Suella Braverman might want to outlaw anger, but even she would struggle to pull that one off, Anna. You can't tell people what they can and can't be angry about any more than I would dream of telling you.
Absolutely, but we can have expectations.
Go on.
The anger then channels into anti-Israel.
Well,
that is what happens.
And then it becomes problematic. But until it does, it isn't.
But
and when you say anti-Israel, you could say anti-Israeli army, anti-Likud.
But that's not true.
Well, I don't know that you can read the minds of everybody.
Very interesting. I don't know if you've looked at the works of the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs.
I'm familiar with some of his work, yes.
He has an incredible video that he's explaining how sometimes actually anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. How it's changed over from the Middle Ages.
You're going a little bit off message now because what we're talking.
You're saying that it's not anti-Israel. It's also anti-Semitic.
I'm not. I'm saying you can't read anybody's mind. There are plenty of people in Israel who've got huge problems with what is going on. Are they anti-Semitic?
And that's what I believe Suella Braverman.
Are they anti-Semitic?
No, people can have issues with the policies.
People can be angry about policies, and they can be Jewish, and they can be angry with Israeli policies, but you wouldn't dream of calling them anti-Semitic.
But I haven't heard any pro-Palestinian march that's come out to condemn Hamas.
Well, how much attention have you been paying? How many of them have you spoken to?
Plenty.
Really?
Yeah, it's very interesting having conversations.
But you were too frightened to attend.
An excuse.
You were too frightened to attend.
But I would never go to a protest.
So when did you talk to them?
Other people.
So when did you talk to them?
I've spoken to individuals.
Yeah, when?
With their opinions.
When?
Over the last couple of weeks.
How?
And there's always an excuse.
But how have you spoken to these? How have you spoken? No, of course you can't. Not if you're going to come on my radio and say things that aren't true.
But it is true.
Well, of course it isn't. Every single
Ariana Grande concert.
Well, I don't want to imagine that. I'm not. I'm talking about marches. Stop it.
I feel bad for the people that were killed, but
you're making stuff up again.
Very, very frustrated.
You're making stuff up again.
No, I'm not. That's exact same parallel.
You're having an imaginary conversation about a completely different atrocity.
No, but what I'm saying to you is the fact is that there needs to be condemnation.
Just before you go, where is your expression? I know you would avail yourself of this opportunity, your compassion for the people being killed in Gaza now.
Absolutely. I said that straight away. I said that earlier on. I said, I do not want to see any innocent civilians, and it's horrific, and it's heartbreaking, and I read an article.
So would you call for it to end then?
I would call for Israel to do whatever it can to
Well, you can't have it both ways, can you?
It's called self-defense.
Okay, well, that's not called compassion then.
And they've notified
that's fine.
all the residents to move.
We got there in the end.
It is compassion. Of course there is compassion.
Well, no, because the people marching are calling for a ceasefire, and you're calling for it to continue while complaining that that other people aren't being compassionate. So the people calling for the killing to end are the angry ones, who are causing fear, and you calling for it to continue are the compassionate one. Do you see where you've ended up, Anna?
No, but
No,
Israel
you
could have
probably don't, do you?
Watch the opening exchange closely because it's the cleanest example in this call of a specific factual claim being tested against specific evidence. Anna says the pro-Palestinian marches always erupt in violence. O'Brien doesn't argue the feeling behind that claim. He reads out the actual charge sheet from the march in question. A handful of arrests, a few specific alleged offenses out of a demonstration reported in the hundreds of thousands. That distinction matters regardless of where you stand on the underlying conflict. A march involving isolated incidents of disorder among a huge crowd is a different claim than a march that erupts into violence, and conflating the two either overstates the danger or understates the scale of peaceful attendance, depending on which way you're arguing. Where this conversation gets harder and more genuinely contested is the exchange about fear, anger, and what each side is entitled to feel. Anna says Jewish people would feel unsafe attending a pro-Palestinian march. O'Brien points out Jewish attendees were present on the march in question. Both things can be true in a nuanced sense. Some Jewish people did march in solidarity and separately. Other Jewish people report feeling unsafe around these demonstrations, given the atmosphere and some of the placards and chants reported at various protests. O'Brien's challenge to the blanket claim is fair. It doesn't fully settle whether the discomfort some people describe is unreasonable, which is a genuinely disputed question, with people on both sides holding sincere views. The anger versus compassion, framing toward the end, is the part worth thinking through carefully, rather than accepting either person's framing at face value. Anna says she's angry about October 7th and compassionate about Gaza. O'Brien pushes her to reconcile of calling for Israel's military response to continue, with claiming the moral position of compassion while framing marchers calling for a ceasefire as the angry, hateful ones. That's a sharp rhetorical move, and it does expose a real tension in her position. But it's also worth noting this frames a legitimately difficult foreign policy question: what proportionate self-defense looks like. Whether and how a war should end, as though there's only one compassionate answer. When serious people across the political spectrum disagree sharply on where that line sits, including many who supported action against Hamas while also calling urgently for civilian protection in Gaza. What's clearly established here is narrower than either side's rhetoric suggests. The specific claim that these marches categorically erupt into violence doesn't hold up against the police record cited. What's genuinely unresolved is everything downstream of that. How real and how justified different communities' fears are, what compassion demands in an active conflict, and whether anger at one atrocity and grief for another can coexist without contradiction. Those aren't questions this call actually answers, whatever tone either speaker takes toward the end. It's also worth noting the reference to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks' work on anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, because that's a genuinely debated question, whether opposition to Israeli government policy or to Zionism as a political project can shade into anti-Semitism, and where that line sits. O'Brien's view that criticism of Israeli policy doesn't equal anti-Semitism is one widely held position. The concern that certain framings of anti-Zionism carry through older anti-Semitic tropes is another. Neither is unreasonable on its face, and this call gestures at the disagreement rather than resolving it. If you want breakdowns that stay precise about what's actually established versus what's still a live, sincere disagreement, that's what this channel is for. Get subscribed to Harry Unfiltered, and I'll keep pulling these apart carefully.